cracking, gang? It's T Nasty, and I'm back with another banger for you guys. MMA can be a heartbreaking sport. It is known to have the highest of highs and lowest of lows for its competitors. But that is what we love the most about this great sport. For every heartbreaking, gut-wrenching moment, there's an equally heartwarming and inspirational moment. So today, I'm going to be breaking down 10 of the most heartwarming victories in UFC history.
Oh, Teixeira's got him flattened out! Oh, just tapped his neck! Oh my God! Oh no!
We begin with Glover Teixeira's upset finish over Jan Blachowicz to win the UFC light heavyweight title at the young age of 42 years old. Taking place in the main event of UFC 267 on October 30th, 2021, nobody expected Teixeira to pick up the championship with his age and Jan Blachowicz' championship run. Teixeira was a fan favorite amongst hardcores for many years, facing the best of the best, even going the distance in a title fight against Jon Jones. Many loved Glover for his high-level grappling, good boxing, and above-average toughness, but nobody expected his late career resurgence, let alone a title win at 42. Although his reign didn't last long, it was truly inspiring to see such a good person and beloved fighter finally touch gold so late in his career. I mentioned this fight already in my Satisfying Humblings video. Taking place at UFC 199, Michael Bisping stepped up on short notice to knock out Luke Rockhold in the first round to claim the UFC middleweight championship. This one may not be a popular choice, as Bisping didn't become beloved until after his retirement. He was actually quite hated while he was still an active fighter. But he has always been one of my favorites, so this was truly a feel-good moment for myself. Objectively though, it was very heartwarming to see a guy like Bisping, who had so many ups and downs and could never seem to win the big one, finally climb that mountain and get the belt. It also was just very satisfying to see him knock out Luke Rockhold, like I said in my other video, and a super happy moment for the UK fans as well. This fight is one of the more recent wins on this list, but that doesn't mean this performance from Adesanya wasn't historic. I'm sure most of you are aware of the history between the two former Glory kickboxing champions. One of the greatest rivalries in the history of combat sports began with Pereira going 2-0 against the last stylebender in kickboxing, once by devastating KO. Pereira just always seemed to have Adesanya's number. Once Israel cemented himself as the UFC middleweight champion, Pereira made his way to the UFC as well and quickly picked up 3 wins, setting up another rematch against Adesanya, this time in MMA for the UFC middleweight championship. Upon their first fight in the UFC, Pereira managed to defeat Adesanya once again, handing him his first loss by finish in MMA and snatching his UFC title. The rematch was then booked for UFC 287 in Brooklyn, New York. In this fight, we saw a different version of Izzy, hungry for revenge and determined to get his belt back. And he did just that, managing to put Pereira in the same spot he had him hurt in multiple times before, but this time he knocked Poatan out cold with a series of punches, regaining his championship and getting that sweet, sweet revenge over his rival. You could see it in his celebration and hear it in his voice afterwards just how amazing he felt to finally get that one back. Izzy has a lot of haters, myself included, but even we couldn't help but be happy for Izzy in that moment. At UFC 162 on December 28, 2013, we witnessed one of the most gruesome injuries of all time, when Anderson Silva shattered his leg in two early in the second round of his rematch with Chris Weidman. It was gut-wrenching to see a legend of the sport in such pain, and it was an even worse road to recovery for Anderson. Eventually making his triumphant return just over a year later in the main event of UFC 183 opposite Nick Diaz. Although the fight wasn't the most entertaining, you could see on Silva's face the relief he felt once the decision was read. After everything he went through losing his title, suffering a life-altering injury, and the long road to recovery, it had to feel good to get back in the win column. And it was inspirational seeing a legend like him come back after such a devastating injury. You can't help but feel joy when watching this one, no matter how the fight actually went. For a long time, MMA fans knew Daniel Cormier was one of the greatest to ever do it. He was just lacking a true title win to cement his legacy. Despite being a 2-time and reigning light heavyweight champion at the time of his first Stipe fight, it felt like there was just something missing from his legacy with the losses to Jon Jones looming over his career. But at UFC 226 during International Fight Week, Cormier was given the opportunity to do something only a special few had done to that point. He stepped up to heavyweight to face Stipe Miocic in a super fight, attempting to become a 2-weight division champion in the UFC. At this point, Miocic had already proved himself to be the greatest heavyweight of all time, scoring 3 consecutive title defenses, the most in divisional history, so it's fair to say many were not picking DC to win by round 1 KO. But early in the first round, the two men clinched up, and Cormier used his trademark dirty boxing to turn Stipe's lights off, knocking him out in front of the world and becoming a double champion. It was clear how much this meant to Cormier, finally proving his greatness by winning a title that wasn't relinquished by his rival Jones. Cormier is a really great guy, and it was amazing to see him finally get his big moment. The happiness on his face was infectious and made it a true feel-good moment.
A moral victory from Leon Edwards.
But that is not the cloth from which he is cut. I mean, that is a degenerate.
Another recent one that was featured in my most satisfying Humblings video was the emphatic head kick KO win by Leon Edwards over Kamaru Usman at UFC 278. Many don't know this was actually a rematch, as Kamaru defeated Leon by decision very early into both of their UFC runs. Many years later, they met once again, now with Kamaru as the dominant welterweight champion and pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world, while Leon was riding on a 10-fight unbeaten streak since their first meeting. This time, they faced off for the welterweight championship, and despite a promising first round for the challenger, he ultimately was dominated across the 5 rounds of action. Before the 5th round, Leon's coach could be heard giving him an inspirational pep talk that lit a fire under Rocky. The commentary team even began questioning in the last minutes of the fight if Leon was searching for a moral victory by making it to the decision. But right as John Anik said the words, "That is not the cloth from which he is cut," Leon launched a devastating head kick that crumpled the dominant champion, earning himself the title and defeating the best fighter in the world at that time. Leon then proceeded to deliver one of the most heartwarming and legendary post-fight interviews of all time. Iconic lines such as "pound for pound, headshot, dead," and "they said I couldn't do it, look at me now." Seriously, go watch that interview after this and tell me you don't get that fuzzy feeling in your heart. It was just amazing to see the joy on Leon's face knowing what he had accomplished. I was a self-admitted Leon Edwards hater before this, but that moment made a fan out of me. Ruthless Robbie Lawler is an OG of the sport and an icon to many fans. The former welterweight champion was known for putting on wars in almost every fight he competed in. Upon the later years of his UFC run, it was evident the damage he had taken across his long career. At UFC 290, his retirement fight was booked, facing off with the much younger and hungrier Nico Price. Many fans weren't sure it would go so well for Robbie, knowing his age and the hybrid's dangerous fight style. But once the cage door closed, we got to see the ruthless Robbie Lawler of old, going straight at Price and knocking him out early in the first round. It is very rare that you see a fighter retire with a win, especially one in such emphatic fashion as this one. But it made perfect sense for a legend like Robbie to retire in the way he did. This was the world working the way it's supposed to. After the fight, the UFC had a retirement promo made for Robbie that they played during the post-fight interview. Robbie was emotional, discussing his career and the way he loved to put on a show for the fans. This is another interview you have to go watch if you truly love this sport. Just a pure, happy, joyful, feel-good moment. In the early years of the UFC bantamweight division, there was one man who seemed to be leagues ahead of all the other fighters. That man was Dominick Cruz. He beat the best of the best that the weight class had to offer at the time, both in the WEC and the UFC after their merger. It wasn't until he cemented himself as the dominant champion that the injury bug hit the Dominator, suffering multiple knee and groin injuries that forced him to relinquish his title and remain out of action for just under 3 whole years. He returned at UFC 178 against the veteran Teixeira Mizugaki, scoring a rare first-round KO. After the fight, he went into detail about all the hardships he faced on his journey back to the octagon, how he had to learn to live without being the champion, and how good it felt to return and get back to his winning ways. Anybody who has suffered through injuries in their athletic career can relate to what he went through and was inspired by his triumph. UFC Hall of Famer Alexander Gustafsson is a fan favorite amongst longtime watchers of the UFC. He is remembered for his exciting fight style with elite boxing skills and a very underrated ground game. He even earned a spot in the Hall of Fame for his epic title clash against Jon Jones that many fans to this day believe he won. On May 28, 2017, the Mauler was gifted with an opportunity to headline a card in his home country of Sweden, clashing with the aforementioned Glover Teixeira. We all knew this was going to be a fun fight, but we were really in for a treat with Gustafsson's performance. Deep into round 5 of the affair, Gustafsson scored the final knockout and victory of his UFC career with some impressive boxing combos and a series of crushing uppercuts that sent Teixeira to the floor. It was heartwarming enough to see a beloved fighter like Alex get a knockout win in his home country, but it didn't end there. After the fight, Gustafsson got down on one knee and proposed to his now wife inside the cage, and of course she said yes. This was a pure feel-good moment from the fight, to the knockout, to the proposal. You could see the happiness on Alex's face getting to have such a happy moment at home. Last but not least, the man on the thumbnail, Dustin Poirier, finally capturing UFC gold. Albeit interim, it doesn't take away from his legacy. It just looks so right. For his entire UFC career, Dustin felt like he was right there in title contention and could have been champion given the right circumstances. After many years of putting on wars against the very best the sport had to offer at both 145 and 155, the Diamond found himself on a title run, beating Bobby Green, Anthony Pettis, Eddie Alvarez, Jim Miller, and Justin Gaethje. When Khabib was suspended following the brawl with Conor McGregor's team after their fight at UFC 229, the UFC was forced to make an interim title fight while the great Nurmagomedov was out. They matched the surging Dustin Poirier against reigning featherweight champion Max Holloway in what was actually a rematch from early in both men's careers, and they met in the main event of UFC 236. What followed was a blood and guts all-out war between the two men. It was pure cinema. Poirier put on a gutsy performance, eating a plethora of shots from Holloway and continuing forward. He managed to outstrike and outdamage Holloway to defeat him for the second time by decision. It may have only been an interim title, but he defeated a current champion to win it, so this was one of the most legit interim titles ever. Just look at the reaction of Dustin when the belt was being wrapped around him. This felt like a culmination of years of hard work. We had watched Dustin grow into an elite fighter before our eyes, and it felt like we were living through it along with him. It felt so good to watch him finally win the big one, and you can tell it meant the world to him as well. This is where the iconic, "I earned this in blood, paid in full" line came from. Just a legendary feel-good moment. Although he went on to lose the unification bout against Khabib, it was still one of the most heartwarming victories to ever happen in the UFC. Like I said in the intro, the UFC and MMA at large can be depressing at times. Your favorite fighters can lose, brutal injuries can happen, legends are often sacrificed to young prospects. And loss means so much more in an individual combat sport. But it can also have some amazing, heartwarming, feel-good moments like these. That is why it is the best sport in the world. Moments like these are much more rare in mainstream sports. If you watch this vid all the way to the end, go ahead and let me know down in the comments what your favorite feel-good moment in UFC history is. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to drop a like, leave a comment, share this shit on Facebook, ring the notification bell, become a member, then create a second account and repeat those steps for me. As always, if you are not doing those things, you are a straight up casual with all due respect. If you want to be a test-maxing, hardcore MMA fan like myself, you must be subscribed to this channel. Let's hit 250 subscribers before the end of the year, gang. This is day 2 of my daily uploads to the end of the year, so stay tuned and subscribe for more juicy end of year content. When I reach that goal, I will be giving away some T-Nasty shirts, so if you want a chance to wear some of the flyest merch in the game for free, make sure to smash that subscribe button and tell your friends. Most people don't even realize they aren't subscribed, so just go down below and click that button. It really helps me out a lot. But with all that being said, I'm out. Take it easy, gang.